So as I told you, I started a blog. Very small. 2 articles out. It's kind of my fodder for thinking about this, thinking out loud. I recently read a book. Morgan Housel has the new book called Same as Ever. It talks about all these things that don't change because like there's so many, like, we talked about news a couple episodes ago, constant change, constant new things to look at. And his book was all about what never changes. So my last blog, as I'm kind of prepping for my, I don't want to call it New Year's resolutions, but like my 2024, what I want to do. I know we both do that. We both do planning for the next year. What I did in my blog is I was like kind of thinking out loud. I prompted myself with a question of what I would bet on for the rest of my life. So that's what I want to know, like what things you would bet on for the rest of your life. And this is what if you had to name like top 3, my top 3 things, and this could be wrong, but in my current stance, like what I would literally bet on being important for me for the rest of my life. I said 1 was my health. If I could take care of everything, invest in anything, my health's always going to be important. When I'm physically doing well, when I'm mentally doing well, life feels better. I think I could bet on the rest of my life. 2 was relationships. Friends, family, partner. 2 should almost be 1, but I think health leads to better relationships. I show up better. I'm more energetic. I'm a better person. But my joy in life is being with people, being in person with people, being with my family, being with my friends. Very, very happy. 3 was more minor, but income, a certain level of income to support 1 and 2, to support my health, to support more healthy foods and paying for a gym, and also just to have dinner with friends and do things with friends and travel with friends. So I'm kind of curious, and it's maybe hard to do on the spot. What would you bet on being important the rest of your life?
I think for me, to get the obvious ones out of the way, I'd say faith. I think being Christian and loving God and loving Jesus and all that good stuff, I would bet on in the sense that I think it's so ingrained in me, whether you believe it's, real or by nurture. I think that's like there for good. And I've been through it in various circumstances. As you were asking me, I was thinking about what things I thought I could bet on in before that I no longer like are very into. So for example, I think if you asked me like 5 years ago, I would probably say like career obsession is something that I'm certain that I'll be like, constantly thinking about. I feel like that's not really that big for me these days. Like just thinking about my career is not that important for me.
Is that because you're more confident in your career?
I think so. I think it came with the confidence. I think it also had to do with other things that I could bet on that are becoming more important. I think that as much as I've always said I was a family person, I think family's skyrocketed so much recently. I think that's like surpassed all else in terms of my future immediate family and then my current immediate family. Way too damn important. Like I'm more confident than anything else that's going to be my bread and butter. Especially knowing like recently there's been a bit of struggle within myself with my family. Nothing strikingly bad, but I think going through tough times in family relationships as you become an adult and you start recognizing things, that gets you to think like, oh, like family's not as perfect as I thought, or like family's not the like, rosy path that I thought. But if you get through those hurdles, then you really are able to test whether or not you're sticking through family because you're taught to stick with family or you actually love your family.
I think this is, again, we're going to hop around. I already tell this and go in so many different directions. One of the big things that I think there's just some sort of level of maturity. Everything is hard in life. Like, this is such a dumb thing to say, but like the dating book says like relationship, there's no spark. Relationships are hard. Families, it's like families are really hard. Partners are really hard. Dating's really hard. Friendships are very hard. People think like people think it's a right fit if it's easy. Like your career's a right fit because it's really easy, or your friends are a right fit because it's really easy. Your family, your partner, your like everything, or running like, oh, he's naturally gifted at that. Like, maybe slightly better, but no one, it's all hard. It's all hard. And that's where the magic is. The magic's in the hard work, the hardness.
And it echoes throughout. The thing that I find fascinating is when there's universal truths, regardless of your belief system, that people come to, regardless of where the source comes from, that confirms for me that it is truly true. The thing that's sparked in my head right now that you just said, hardness like shapes us, and hardness is where the beauty is. Like that's such a core principle in almost any religion, any mainstream religion that you see, especially I can only speak for Christianity, but there's like beauty in suffering. Like people ask like, how is it that you guys get through bad things? Like how can God, a perfect God, like get you to bad things? And I think the self, reasoning or the rationalization from the outside view, and then the wisdom view based on the Bible or whatever, is that like God grants us those things because that allows us to grow and see the beauty of life through that thing. Like for example, recently I hurt my shoulder. I dislocated it. That got me to recognize how much of a blessing it is to have a normal functioning body, and also how important it is to stay fit and eat healthy. As counter logical and circular reasoning this might sound, I don't think I would have come to that conclusion if it wasn't for my shoulder. Like it took my shoulder being dislocated for me to realize that. That sounds unbelievably privileged, but that's the reality of how I've been built for 26 years. And my shoulder hurting, my back hurting has gotten me to start eating carrots. That's how I am.
Yeah.
That's literally who I am.
It's not a shame that you have to wait for something like, hopefully your shoulder can bounce back permanently. Maybe it can,
Maybe
but
it can.
It's not a shame you have to wait for something to permanently happen. You have to have like some sort of event or some sort of catalyst, which makes sense because it's really hard to change your lifestyle before you see a negative reaction to your lifestyle. Like, I don't know if I want to talk about like smoking. It's probably really hard to quit smoking. Everyone knows it causes cancer at this point. So that's not a good analogy, but that feels like a shame. I don't know where else I'm going with this, but that feels like
it is. It's sad that it, for most human beings, whether we want to agree or not, unless you've had the ability to quit or stop something before, that gives you an accomplishment feeling that allows you to enable it later. Even then, it's hard. For example, a huge turning point for me was when I massively lost weight, second semester of college. People say freshman 15. I got like freshman, sophomore 30. I gained 30 pounds college. I went from 150 to like 180. At peak, I hit 190. I remember junior year. And senior year, I think it has to do with alignment of external motivators and internal motivations. As in, I am very good at taking negative feedback and turning that into change for me. That works for me. When people call me fat, I want to lose weight. I know that doesn't work for everyone. And for those that are hurt by those things, you should not push them the wrong way. I feel like that's very valid if someone's like, hey, stop calling me fat. Like, I know that I'm fat, but like you call me fat or you call me overweight doesn't get me to lose weight or have a healthy lifestyle. I have my own way to do that. That I think is important to be aligned. But knowing what works for you is probably the most important. And for me, negative feedback or criticism, one, because I have such a high self-esteem, and two, I know that I have a very ongoing trust that people around me, like Mike, care about me. I know that external feedback, which on principle might sound negative, is for my better. And I'm very good at turning that around.
So this goes into another chaotic subject. How much do we have a duty to tell the truth? Because you're saying like, someone's calling you fat has to be true as well too.
Sure.
And I do believe to some degree in radical candor. Ray Dalio talks about radical candor, which means be honest, sometimes be brutally honest. And he thinks it's a net good. How much do you think we have, we can go into a whole topic about obligation, but how much we have a duty to truth telling?
I struggle with this a lot because I think it's such a deep rooted principle in me, whether it be through family or through faith or just like my naturalness of needing to tell the truth. But I feel like as you get older, you hold back because one, your brain is getting harder, and I think you have an inability to be overly critical, or you become so overly critical, you know that the impact that you're about to have is bad. I think that on average, you could argue society's getting softer, but even that aside, I think that you almost care about people less and less and less, and you have more worry about yourself. So you have a less tendency to go out of your way to say, hey, by the way, you suck at this, or like, by the way, you're wrong about this. That aside, I think for me, being honest and letting people know is so important to me. I don't know if it's so much about obligation and more so like my preference. Like, because I have such a confidence for what I know. It's shaking a little bit recently, actually. But I think for the most part, if I'm saying something, I am very confident in what I'm saying. And I'm letting them know because I care. I think the flip side of that is I'm so clear on who I care about and who I don't care about. I find no need to be constructively honest for people that I don't care about, which sounds cold, but that's just who I am.
Sure.
So, which I think emphasizes when I am honest, I'm doing it really for their own good, in my opinion.
I like that. So I think and I started off this episode talking about what you think will never change. And that's the same thing as goals. I remember when I talked about, I started making principles for myself, goals. I'm agnostic. I don't have like a rule book, for lack of a better term. I don't have the Bible to pay attention to. I don't like this stuff. When I even ask a question of, should you lie? Should you not lie? Well, it's like, what are your goals? What are your priorities? Like, that has to be in relation to something, right? It's not an absolute thing. It's in like, okay, you want to have better relationships. You want people to do that for you. That's why you do it. But the end goal for that might be relationships. So for me, like, okay, if I want health, I want good relationships. What leads to that? What leads to like, and this is how I break down my goal setting. Like, what are the higher order things I want? Like health and relationships, I feel really good. That's a good goal. Like feeling really good, feeling healthy. So how am I really healthy? Like, okay, I'm not drinking, or I'm doing this, or I'm working out, or I'm making sure I'm not going to slice a pizza, but I'm getting salad after this.
Sure.
So I'm going to go run and be healthy. But if one of my goals is relationship, and I think like now you have to break that down. And I think that's how you said, like, you need top order and you need bottom up. Like, okay, what leads to really good relationships? Oh, should you be arguing? Like, sometimes you should argue, sometimes you shouldn't, but should you always be truthful? Like, I'm not sure. And this kind of relationships ended up on my priorities and goal list when I had some really like rough arguments with my sister of like, we disagree on a lot and we're very good at arguing with each other. And I realized if we kind of kept down the path we were going on, and like she realized this too, like we weren't gonna end up having a relationship. Like I talked about this with you. So I kind of set a goal, like get better at relationships, which is a really hard goal. And one of those was like, I don't actually need to argue with my sister. Like, I don't think I'm gonna change her mind. I don't think she's gonna change my mind. But my end goal is not necessarily to like say everything I believe to my sister. Before I was like, I need to be truthful. She's saying something I fundamentally disagree with. I need to argue back. That was my end goal. My life was not better off because of that end goal. I wasn't changing her mind. There was no greater moral obligation to do that, I don't think. Now I have a much better relationship with my sister. We're not arguing. I'm just choosing not to argue. And she doesn't argue by nature. So when I bring it up, she then gets like argues. That doesn't happen anymore because I decided I'm just not gonna argue with her. And it's been wonderful. It's been great because I have that goal, the priority to tie it back to.
And I think that's what, in some ways, makes it easier for me. You made the like rule book reference. I think for me, I don't do this 24/7, but a part of it is like, how do I bring this back to God? Or like, how do I bring this back to my faith? Or how do I bring this back to the set of principles that I'm at least choosing to believe in, or I think I believe in? And for example, even in like conflicts between you and me, let's say, I think I'm constantly thinking like, how is this representing me as a Christian? How does this better relate to like showing God's glory? And then ultimately, is this leading to you and me getting closer to God or getting further away from God? And that's like the principles that guide me in any relationship when I'm trying to be rational. Of course, I blow up and things like that. But I think always in reflection, there's points of like self-guilt and self-reflection and self-motivation of, by me calling this out in this exact moment in this manner to Mike, does that make me more Christ-like or less Christ-like, or more God-like, less God-like? In Mike's perspective, not that he's actively grading me or criticizing me, but if Mike is laying down at night, hopefully he's not thinking about me on bed, but let's say he's late night, he's thinking
like once a week.
Late night, he's thinking, he goes, oh, like Brian and I had this conversation, and I feel like if he wasn't a Christian, he would have acted this way. But because he is, he probably went this way. If you have that one moment in your entire life, I feel like I've done a decently good job. Because one of the things that I reflect a lot these days is, if for my faith to be real, there has to be a difference between just a nice person and a Christian person. I feel like you can be morally nice in this world. I'm shocked by people actually doing this, but there are people that are just nice, that don't have a religious compass. In fact, many of the people that I've met that are actually nice are not religious. They're just nice. But there has to be a difference between those two things.
How would you define nice? I think religion's easier to define. You can do that second, but how would you define, like, let's just make it easily
Let me make it
nice.
super easy. Last night I went to Bible study, and the question was, have you prayed for this country's leaders before? That was the question.
Are the questions usually like that?
No. Yesterday was awfully specific and like weirdly political. And everyone was like going around and like being, watching what they're saying because it's church. And they were like, oh, probably haven't. And I thought about this and I thought, I feel like even non-religious people in colloquial saying could say, I want to pray for that homeless person in New York. Or like, I have a heart for that homeless person in New York because they feel bad. There's a feeling of like, I am in a better standing in that person. Society kind of teaches you to care for the homeless to a certain degree. We all put ourselves in some range where we're here. There's people that are better than us and there's people that are lesser than us. And it's a lot easier to care about people that are lesser than us by human nature.
Can we use the term less fortunate? Is that fine?
That's fine.
Not a what do we call it? Not a line thing. Just like I think it's easier.
Sure. Less fortunate.
Less, like what? What are you saying? Less
fortunate than us. And or less impact, less influential, or whatever it is.
Okay.
What range? I would argue people that are leading this country are more influential than us, and for the most part, better well off than us.
Yeah.
It's very hard to think positively of those people. Of course, you might like them in political preference, but I don't think anyone goes day by day and thinking like, I really hope President Biden is having a good day today. Like that's not a thought that I think most people, maybe other than Dr. Biden, his wife, have.
I think a lot. Maybe I actually don't know. I want to say I hope a lot of people recognize how freaking hard the job of the president is, but maybe they don't.
But they don't. But I'm saying, especially the opposing party does not. Can we agree on that? People who don't.
I think I would actually argue they know it most intimately, but the rhetoric does not.
Oh,
There's no reason to be like Biden has a hard job.
By opposite party, I don't mean conservative politicians. I'm talking about people who don't like President Biden as citizens. People who despise Joe Biden.
Well, that's human nature. Like, you don't like a guy and he was like mean to you, like fucking like he wasn't having a bad day. No, you have a bad day. Other people don't have bad days. That's a psychology.
So you're hitting exactly what I'm trying to say. That has to be the difference between a good person and a Christian person that I'm constantly struggling with. As in, okay, there are things that I disagree with President Biden. I won't openly say I don't like him, but there's things that I disagree with President Biden. Sure. I've never thought in my life I want to pray for President Biden. That's just not a thought that I came across. But yesterday's conclusion is that if anything, if I truly believe in God's kingdom and like the principles of Christianity, the person that could have almost in some ways the most impact directly could be a President Biden, for example, because there's so much influence there. Or it could be like BTS, or it's someone that is a worldly leader has so much impact.
Right.
And if anything, as much as I want to pray for someone that is less fortunate than me, because I've been taught to do that even in societal terms. That doesn't have anything to do with Christianity. I've been taught in school to care about homeless people in some degree. We learned poverty at Washington Lee. The mindset of wanting to pray and caring about leaders who in the worldly sense doesn't need the care of anyone. They have money, they have influence or whatever, is the set apartness that I think that Christians should have over just nice people. Because if there's no difference, then there's no point of the religion. You might as well just be the nice person. I'm trying to say that's what sets me apart, or that's what I'm trying to be set apart by.
Our definition of niceness we're in the West, everything comes from Christian values. Like a lot of even the definition of niceness comes from Christian values.
You want to say that?
Do you disagree?
I completely agree. But
okay. Yeah. Okay. I think it's different what we say here and what you cut into TikToks. David Perel has a whole article about that. I think I've sent you millions of times. I feel like more than once. I don't know if the nation is founded on Christian values. But the definition of niceness, I don't know unless it's, I'll say this a lot, because it's unless your truth is, and Elon Musk likes to say, unless it goes against the laws of physics or math, it's not true. What is truth? Okay, what is niceness? Is it evolutionary niceness? Because if it's the law of the jungle, that's very, very different than the law of the Bible. But otherwise, how do you decide what laws to follow? There's a little bit of the golden rule, let's not kill because you don't want to be killed. Let's be nice because you don't want people to be mean to you. But what is being nice? It's being, I don't know, considerate. love your neighbor as thyself. Like that's the same thing. That's what the golden rule is. Even I say the golden rule, that's derived from a Christian law, right? So it's like what I have no, like it's the David Foster Wallace. Yeah, two fish go swimming next to each other. One fish asks the other one, "Oh, hey, how's the water today?" The other fish goes, "What's water?" Like we're surrounded by all these values and niceness and definitions, but I think a lot of it is derived from religion.
I agree.
I hope that's not a hot take.
No, I don't think it is at all. Okay. But I like hot takes. I think it's a little different from what I'm trying to say. You got what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that growingly, I feel like for my religion and my faith to be legitimate, there has to be something that's set apart from just being nice. Like I feel people often misconstrue or confuse themselves between like being a Christian and just being nice. There has to be principles and to your point, the book that you believe in. Yeah. There's things that you toe constantly where there. In fact, to your point, and I won't touch muddy waters, but there's things that I will analogously say to the water where there's certain definitions of nice that in 2023 that worldly or non-religious people would completely agree that is a nice thing to do. Mm-hmm. That I would argue. Christians would argue that's the wrong thing to do. So already there are diversions in what is considered nice and what is correct, what is considered correct in Bible terms.
So you think nice people won't, I don't say pray, they won't wish well on someone they don't like, but Christians, I think nice people ought to do that.
Oh no! So that's not.
What's the divergence?
That's not the specific. Well, I don't want to get into like super sensitive topics, okay. But I'm saying there are things. I'll use pineapple on pizza as an example. Pineapple pizza obviously not in the Bible, but let's say pineapple. There's people. I think people are smart enough to understand the different analogies in the Bible. Let's say it says, "Thou shalt not eat pineapple pizza." Let's say I'm being very blasphemic. Sorry, God. But the Bible says, "Thou shalt not eat pineapple pizza." There are things in this world that over modern times have progressed where liking pineapple pizza is like the given. Like you must like pineapple pizza.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, and I get where you're not going to. That's fine. Okay.
And there's very clear things. There's many things like that I would say where I agree with you. The origins of a lot of moral guidelines for this world have derived from religion and Christianity. But there are also things that have drastically diverted from that, where people of the nice world side and Christians collide on.
Yeah,
tons actually.
But if the Bible. That's interesting because morality obviously changes and what people believe like you should do and should not do obviously changes. So it's kind of a combination of what stayed the same and what has changed. Do you think, and this is really interesting, going back to how I prompted this, like what never changes, do you think the stuff that hasn't changed, like I think love your neighbor as yourself, I don't think that's changed. Do you think there's a reason that hasn't changed? I would argue that's baked into our DNA.
I would like to take a step further and 100% agreed. In my worldview and my religious view, it has to be baked into your DNA. As in, that's clearly the right thing to do. I mean, the two, I don't want to turn this into a religious podcast, so I feel bad, but the two like greatest commandments. So there's 10 commandments. The first 4 is about God. The next 6 are about other people.
The imagery one. So I want to do a whole episode on the imagery one. My whole book's about this. I have a book.
But the first 4 dictate how you should have a relationship with God, and the next 6 are about how you should have a relationship with others. Jesus came and was like, you know what? Not forget, but here's the TLDR. Love God with all your heart, all your strength, all your might. Love your neighbors as yourself.
Really?
If you follow those 2 things, that's in Matthew 28 or something.
Okay.
If you follow those 2 things, all 10 will happen naturally. If you love your neighbor as yourself, then you're not gonna covet, you're not gonna cheat, you're not gonna lie, you're not gonna steal.
Right.
Blah, 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 blah. Of course, I'm forgetting them. If you love your God with all your might and all your soul, you're not going to idolize other gods. You're going to keep Sabbath, blah, 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 blah. So if you have those principles, all the other things will come through naturally. And which is why I think by definition, those are the things in our DNA to follow.
I love this. I now know why I want to take this. Let's go from an agnostic view. I think love thy neighbor as himself. How you build a society around that is fairly obvious. We can go into like, that feels like the community I would want to live in. Sure. People are nice to you. They're not going to steal. They're not going to kill you. That seems great. How does loving God?
Yep.
How does that
manifest into my life?
Yeah.
So Christianity, in my opinion, set apart with other religions because of this emphasis on personal relationship with God. Like God is your friend. God is your father. And there is a reference that I heard at a sermon before. Someone asked me, or the preacher presented to the crowd, what do you think is the purpose of a butterfly? And everyone was like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And he was like, butterflies don't really contribute to the ecosystem. Like they're not like bees where they pollinate honey. Like butterflies are very useless was the point that he was trying to make. And he was making all these like biological.
Someone eats them.
Sure, but I'm saying he even said like there's other things that those bugs can eat. And he's just trying to make the reference that butterflies don't really serve a purpose other than like being beautiful. And there's replacements. Don't get so caught up on the butterfly itself.
I'll assume he's right. I'll assume he's right.
Butterflies are useless. Butterflies are useless.
Yeah.
Even if they're not, he's saying it's useless.
Yeah.
He said, what do you think about when you think of butterflies? And everyone was like, obviously the cocoon thing turning into the butterfly.
Yeah. Metamorphosis.
And he said, there are things, if you truly believe in the Bible, if you truly believe in God, there are things in the world that God has placed for us to better understand him, because God is so apart from us that us as dumb human beings need worldly examples to use as analogies to understand the things. The same way that you and I use analogies all the time. God is providing analogies for us to understand him. He was saying how the butterfly transformation is a perfect analogy of how we transform as Christians. This ugly cocoon or whatever suddenly unexpectedly becomes this butterfly through this time of cocooning. And he very dumb. I was in middle school, and where everyone was like, "Whoa, like sure." The same way, I think that there's a reason why personal relationships exist, because it's a good metaphor, it's a good analogy, it's a good physical personified representation of what a relationship is supposed to be. Granted, humans are faulty, humans are sinful. I'm going to stop saying in Christian terms because I'm obviously talking in Christian terms, and we're unable to have perfect relationships. You and I, over our decade, have fought. We have different conflicts, and we're selfish in our nature, so we push our own agendas. And we're unable to 100% put the other before me. Whereas God is a perfect being. Therefore, God's views on us is perfect, but our relationship with him was previously broken, but Jesus mended it. I'm not going to go into the gospel. So I look to my personal relationships and think about what gets those things going to get to my personal relationship with God. So for example, you and I wouldn't be this dedicated friends if, for example, we didn't talk as much.
Sure.
If we didn't live in the same place.
Yep.
If we didn't share interests, and at the end of the day, we didn't care for each other.
Yep.
You are not my God, so I don't really live for you. But there are aspects of my life where I do live for you. Like this podcast, for example, I like doing because part of it increases our friendship and I have trust in you or whatever.
Yeah.
I apply the same thing towards the God thing, where how do I manifest it? I think about what are God's priorities? What would God do in this situation? The whole idea of what would Jesus do, I think is almost wrongly construed into thinking, oh, I have to be like Jesus, I have to be nice. It's also, what would God actually do in this situation that makes me show his love for him? That works across all other relationships. How do I best represent my dad? How am I Mr. Junn's son by being Mr. Junn's son in the best way possible? We are God's sons and daughters, and therefore loving him equates to honoring him and laying out the right principles set on by him. That is how it's manifested to show that I love him. The same way that me loving my girlfriend, me loving my brother, me loving you is shown through my actions in consideration of you.
So I think it almost helps you love thy neighbor as thyself. Like learn how to love, learn how to. Is it also a little meditative and like self-reflection as well too?
100%. I think if it wasn't there, I wouldn't be like that. And there's the whole point of repentance and being able to think about what you've done wrong can only exist if there's a line that you could test that against. There's nothing to repent if you don't know what you're repenting against. But if I reflect throughout the day, yesterday, I'll bring a personal example and I'll confess to you. Like after we had our argument or whatever about the podcast, I sat down and I was like, was I Christ-like or godly? Like in those actions, like could I have held my tongue on certain things? Could I have meditated some things down? Could I have not been as offensive? Would God have done the same thing? Would Jesus, if Jesus did a podcast with Mike, how would he have handled it? Are the thoughts that come in my head, and I would like to argue that comes from me loving God because I honor and value what he stands for.
I think that makes sense.
And I think that's how it's manifested. Which is why if I project it onto atheists or agnostics, I think it has to be a society thing or a world thing or even an earth thing where you go about your day and you're about to litter on the ground. The line that you're testing it against is this making the world a better place? Is this making Earth a healthier place? And if those standards work for you, power be to you. Obviously, I'd rather prefer that I evangelize whatever, but I think that's the line that I would hope, at the very least, agnostics are testing against. How are my actions affecting the society and this world? Because what else would you be testing against?
I don't know. And I think I want to wrap this up, one, because I'm losing steam, and I think it's a good place. Like,
sure,
if I could bet on something the rest of my life, like be a kind, compassionate person, be a better person, I think that leads to like being that. I think that increases your own life. If you're kind to people, I think that will come back. If you're nice, I think that will come back. I think Lex Fridman he talks about the world is beautiful, it's grand, love is great. Try to understand what the other person is saying. Try to have arguments with a side you don't agree with. I feel like we don't do that enough. I think you and I are great at that. There's a lot of things we technically we're on polar opposites of the aisle on many issues. But I understand where your view comes from. You understand where my view comes from. We may not necessarily have that view, but I get how one can have that view. I like the idea of preaching love and kindness. That'd be a nice way to take this podcast too. And I think that's very, if anyone wants to agree with us for that, after a whole conversation, having an intellectually honest conversation about religion, disagreeing on it. Yeah, what's your kind and message? You asked me a hot take a couple episodes ago, X amount of episodes ago. What's your cold take, your nice take? What's your last way you want to end this? What do you want people to take? I have a better question.
Oof.
People today, they can do one thing better, and I'll do mine, then you do yours. If you could do one thing that I have dramatically improved my life or I want to work on, which I'm not great at, I would argue try not to be cause of an argument. Try to
Damn, I was gonna say that.
Try to make it so someone doesn't. Oh, I know it actually. A book called The Art of Communication. I've only read 2-3 pages. It's actually one of those short books that has a lot of wisdom packed in. My dad sent it to me. It talks about the goal when you're interacting with any other human being, any other person, is to reduce their suffering. So put yourself in their shoes. If what you say is about to make them suffer in the long run, maybe not short term, but in the long run, then you probably shouldn't do it. So I say try to alleviate suffering other people as much as you can in your daily life. We can't fix the issues of the world, but I can make it so Brian, that's going to piss him off. Let's rephrase it. Let's say it differently. Unless sometimes you have to have hard conversations for the long term, and that's minimizing suffering in the long term. But in the short term, I think we can do that.
I read a book recently.
No way.
I'll try to be you. I know. It was a Korean book, and it was made during COVID by this professor, and it's literally just called Simple Ways to Be Happy. And it talks about one of the chapters is have your baseball team. And you're like, what? And it talks about how baseball fans are so happy because they have something to care about. Even though to external people, it might seem stupid, they have the baseball field to look forward to. So it's saying have simple pleasures. Another chapter was give random gifts. Don't do scheduled gifts. Don't do Christmas gifts. Give gifts because you want to. Makes you happier. The two chapters that stood out to me the most was one called People Like Losers. And it's not like losers as in sore losers, but people like people that let other people win on things that don't really matter at the end of the day. And I feel like I'm someone that really doesn't like losing in that regard, but it's something that's been cutting me alive. The second one is know that other people are probably just as moral/right as you, if not more. So I combined those two chapters together in my head and thought, what am I bad at? And I was gonna say the argument thing, but I think more so people don't change, in my opinion. And what's even more stronger is you can't change people. Those are my two things, in my opinion. People change on their own and situations change people, but I don't think people change people, and I think people definitely don't change in general. Meaning, there's only really to lose by enforcing your momentary beliefs or suggestions down someone's throat. It's only going to lead to conflict in most cases. Unless you're super wise or you have some authority over that person, even then, to your point, it's going to add to that suffering. So recently what I've been doing, at a fault, but I'm trying my best, is in the heat of the moment, when I feel such an urge to say something or such an urge to shut this person down or say that they're wrong, I think about myself 5 seconds later after that moment, 15 seconds later after that moment, 5 minutes after that moment, 10 minutes after that moment, and think, me saying this, is this going to change this person's mind? Probably not. Me saying this, is this going to upset this person? 100. I know that for a fact. And I would rather bet on the 100% than the negative 15%. So I've been trying my hardest. I know you already said to not argue, but for me, it's knowing that this person is probably doing this action or making this decision because she actually thinks that this is the right thing in their mind. And 2, I'm willing to lose. If in my mind, I become a bigger person by losing, that person doesn't even need to know that. In their mind, I'm just agreeing with them or I'm just letting them be, then everyone's happy. And the other result would have been this person's unhappy and their person's mind's not changed. There's almost net no difference other than this person is mad.
Right.
And I think that's maturity.
I love that. I think there's so much beauty in like, you can get along with people that you have different opinions with.
You can.
And that's like a thing I don't like understand in this. Like, you don't have to believe the same thing.
No.
But you can still go on a coffee walk and talk about dating or what you saw last night or the Netflix show you're watching. Like, a great example of that.
And I'll close the loop here and say that I used to think that didn't align with my religious values. I thought that being a Christian meant going out into the world and spreading my beliefs, which in a way it is. I will still not stand down if someone prompts me and says, what do you believe in? Or do you believe this is wrong? I think I'm in the right and I should never lie. I should not say, I don't believe in this to hide my mind. That's wrong.
Yeah.
I would almost argue atheists don't even want you to do that. That people want opinions. That's a very American value. But on the flip side, there's no reason for me to intrude in your space out of your way to say, here's my beliefs.
Right.
I want your reaction. In fact, I already know what you're going to say to this. I want to inflammatory you. Like I want to provoke you.
Yeah.
I want to get you to be railed up. There's far more to be preached, if anything, with this person knowing my view on something, for me to say, Mike, even though we disagree, I still care for you. And what's more important is this sounds very romantic, our bond and our relationship is far superseding our differences, because even within similar belief systems, no two people 100% agrees on everything. There's no point in colliding those together.
Right.
And me loving you and caring for you and lowering your suffering far more is in line with me loving God and me treating others as myself than me going out of my way to provoke you.
I agree. So be kind.
Be kind.
Considerate.
Be considerate.
Alleviate suffering. Agree to disagree. And that's the Michael, Brian, and Mike podcast.